DA was such a bulldog. Like leading up to the second trial, she was telling me that one of the jurors reached out to the DA's office and told her that it was like 10-2 in favor of guilty. So, she was telling me, you guys are cooked. You almost got a conviction in the last trial. It's so much stress. And we went in and we got a not guilty on both counts. So it was it was very difficult, but it was like extra satisfying because when the DA is like, oh, you don't have a shot. You love being the underdog and coming up and coming on top and saying, now what?
Welcome to Hot Docket, the show where we talk about winning marketing strategies that have built the most successful law firms.
Join us every 2 weeks for the latest trends and tactics to grow your law firm.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Hot Docket podcast. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Joe Simons of the Simons Law Office out of Boston. Criminal defense attorney, should say that. Very important. Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Awesome. So I think it's like a good starting point. Anybody who's in the world of criminal defense, it feels like there's a very good reason they ended up there. So I'd love for you to just share with us why you ended up in criminal defense.
All right, I guess we're jumping right in. So I never thought I was going to be a defense lawyer. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. And when I was 19, I was a high school dropout. I was, just kicking around. I wanted to be a musician, so I was playing in bands and thought that was going to be my career. And I got arrested. I was one stupid, terrible night. I drove drunk. I had cocaine on me. And I got into a little crash. My car flipped over. It was crazy. And I got arrested for drunk driving and possession with intent, whatever the analogous charge in New York is. And I went to jail for a few days. And then I went to court. I met a public defender who I had never met before. He didn't ask me any questions. He must have read the police report. And he basically started the conversation by saying, we might be able to get you 6 months in jail for this. Never thought about defending me, never thought about the fact there was another guy in the car. Maybe it could have been his. Maybe it wasn't mine. Maybe there was some alternate explanation. Somebody else could have used the car. Anyway, it really turned me, I was frightened. I was like, oh my God, this guy doesn't care about me at all. And thankfully, my parents scraped together money and they hired a private attorney. And then over the course of several months, he was negotiating. He was telling me to, take classes and do things that I didn't feel I needed, but I did them and it worked out. I ended up getting probation. And it struck me, one, that, public defenders are terrible. I hated them for so long. And also, why are people going to jail for nonviolent drug offenses? Like I very closely went to serve a jail sentence for something that I wasn't. The OUI, frankly, was worse because I crashed. I could have hurt somebody. The drugs, my God, I started reading and researching and understanding the drug laws and how harsh they are and how mandatory minimums exist and things that just, to me, don't make sense. So all of that really led me to become interested in the law and trying to help other people. And so then I became I got my GED, went to college, went to law school, all with the purpose of knowing that I wanted to be a defense lawyer so that other people who are in that same position hopefully won't be facing the same potential fate.
I think it's pretty crazy when you look into the amount of cases that a public defender has to handle and you look at the impossible situation where they're in, where the amount of time they have to dedicate to any individual is so limited. But I think that's something that most people don't understand right off the bat. Could you speak a little bit to that? Because I'm sure you've dug in there a little bit.
I have, yeah. And you're absolutely right. I said I hated public defenders in the past tense. I've met a lot of good people now who are in this work, are in it for good reasons, want to help people. But even there, the system is set up so that they're so inundated with cases that if I get a case and I've got the ability to, spend, let's say, 15 hours preparing and investigating that same case, maybe they've got 3 hours. I'm just coming up with numbers off the top of my head. But the reality is they don't have as much time. They're going into court almost every day with a stack of, 5 to 10 cases. I'm going in, I got a single case that I'm dealing with. So I've spent a lot more time with my client. And that's where I think there are a lot of times better results because there's no real magic here. If you got two lawyers who care the same, a public defender and a private attorney with more time, it's just being able to spend more time and getting to know the case better and maybe issuing more discovery requests or spending more time with an investigator who's gone out to the scene or stuff like that. It's really just putting in the time that causes those sort of magic moments in court and those great wins sometimes.
Which kind of leads me to a question that we've talked to a lot of plaintiff lawyers. I don't think we've talked to a ton of defense lawyers on this podcast. And one of the things that one of those lawyers said to us really resonated with me. He said, if you have the facts, pound the facts. If you have the law, pound the law. And if you have neither, pound the table. I want to know from you, like on the criminal defense side, how often are you pounding the table? And how often are you pounding the other two?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, sometimes the facts are bad. Like sometimes there's video evidence. Sometimes you're just having to come up with something. I don't know. I feel like I've been able to be pretty creative. I mean, every time I go to trial, I hype myself up, even if I know it's a case that we're very unlikely to win. I know my client's counting on me. I know they've made the decision to go to trial because we've already discussed the ins and outs, the pros and cons. I've given them my advice. And if they still want to go to trial on a case that seems unwinnable, I don't know. I would say I'm more often pounding the facts in my personal experience. And the facts may be the facts that we're positing as true, or just the facts of like, here's a hole in the case. Here's something the investigation from the police didn't uncover. Here's some witness that didn't get interviewed. Here's, because I'm a lot of times trying to come up with an alternate possibility rather than actually saying this is what happened or this didn't happen.
Can you walk us through really quick what types of cases your firm handles?
I've done everything from drunk driving to murder trials and everything in between. On a given day, it's such a wide variety. If somebody were to ask me what like a typical case is, it's a criminal case, but it could be a white collar, mortgage fraud case in federal court. It could be an assault and battery or a home invasion case in state court. And I kind of like the variety because you meet a lot of different people, a lot of interesting people. And so, yeah, pretty much any and every criminal type of case you could imagine.
Can you walk me through a time, if ever, that you've had to walk away from a case?
Yeah, so I have sort of two answers to that inquiry. So one is I try not to take cases if I feel like I can't give it 100%. Like if I know off the bat that something about the allegations or the client just doesn't sit right with me, or I feel like for whatever reason I can't help them, I'll decline the case. If I've taken a case, I have had to withdraw, thankfully not too much, but it's only been because of having a client that I feel is difficult, like somebody I just can't work with. And I feel like I can work with a lot of people. I don't judge. If somebody's guilty, that usually doesn't bother me. I mean, I've had very difficult cases, murders, sexual assaults. Things are, things that most people would find abhorrent, myself included, but I can put that aside. Like I feel like I'm advocating for my client. I'm upholding their rights. I'm arguing for them. I'm making sure that justice is done and trying to win their cases as I should. But it's usually if it's a difficult client or somebody that just won't take my advice or won't even listen, or calls all the time and tells me, oh yeah, ChatGPT told me this. I'm fine with that if we can then reason and I can explain, hey, maybe that's not correct and here's why. But some people just, it seems like why hire a lawyer, because certain people just don't want to listen. And if that relationship breaks apart, it's usually more of a personality thing than a case related allegation.
On that concept of ChatGPT, I was going through I'm curious what your take on this is. I was going through like a pretty difficult situation, and I found myself like talking with ChatGPT about it, and it was medical. So we were going back and forth and I was getting answers and all this other stuff, but I found myself reticent to go to the doctors and be like, well, ChatGPT told me like yada, yada, yada. So does that make sense? But when I did ask them certain things that it told me, they were like, yeah, 100%, that's right. So like, how do you fall on that line of like, it's annoying versus this is actually really interesting and maybe even brought up a point that I wasn't thinking of?
I think for the most part, I'm open to it. And I think that it can actually uncover insights, and I'm always open to it. It's when I referenced it, like, it's not necessarily a ChatGPT thing. It could be if somebody's held in jail, it could be like another person who's been through a different case and telling them, they call them like a jailhouse lawyer, like they're getting their advice from a jailhouse lawyer instead of their lawyer that they're paying. So it's not a ChatGPT thing that I don't like, but I do. I think that sometimes clients look something up and they'll tell me they looked it up. Sometimes it's right. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's in the middle. Sometimes I'll say, you know what, that's an interesting point. Let me look into it and get back to you. I don't hate it. I mean, I do like to have a client who is active in their own case. I think that there's a level of like, I don't want complete passive client. I want somebody, because they're making decisions too. I'll come to them and I'll say, hey, here's a few different paths we could take. we could request this video, but if we do, the prosecution's going to know about it because we got to put in a motion in court. Do we want that video? Do we not? So a lot of times I'm relying on their insight. They were there, maybe. They might be able to tell me, is this going to be helpful, or do we want to leave this alone? Or there's a lot of examples like that. So yeah, I don't hate ChatGPT.
And I totally relate to that feeling of not wanting a client who's just so passive and pointing to you like, you're the expert, you tell me. It's the same way in our work in branding. Like, yeah, we can understand the technical ramifications of choice A or B or color X or Y, but it's your brand. Like, we want you to feel invested in the end work product, right? So we'll give you options, but maybe you should pick which one resonates with you. So I think it's probably pretty similar in how you view defense.
Yeah, I imagine so. And for the doctor thing, did you ever bring that up to the doctor? Like, did you ever tell the doctor what the ChatGPT was suggesting?
Yeah. And like, it's a little bit different because that's not like, it's not saying like, oh, it's not giving you like a cure or like an advice for it. It's just telling you kind of like overview. Here's what's happening. Here's where you're at, yada, yada, yada. So for them, it's not like a situation where they're going to have to be like, well, that's wrong, because it's not really like a wrong or right thing so much as just like a factual, here's where you're at. So,
well, and just too, I mean, I've been to the doctor before where the doctor's like, oh, let me look something up. And then they Google something. So, I mean, doctors are human too. They're Googling stuff too. I mean, you hope not as much as you are because they know a little bit more. But I mean, that's the thing too about lawyers, just not to go on a tangent, but I think that people don't always understand that lawyers don't have all the knowledge in their head. I mean, somebody might ask me like, well, what's the maximum sentence for this crime? And I mean, there's thousands of crimes. I don't know off the top of my head. There might be some I'm like, yeah, okay, assault and battery, 2.5 years. But yeah, I mean, we're looking stuff up all the time. So if a client asks me a quick question on email, it could take me like a half an hour to do some research just to get back. So I think it's valuable to have, resources online to be able to turn to.
Completely turning the direction of the call a little bit. Your life prior to becoming a lawyer seems pretty interesting. Can you tell us about some of the bands you were in and what was going on?
Yeah, so I mostly played, with people in high school and a little bit beyond. And I'm from a small town, Oneonta to New York, and we didn't really get big, but we, sometimes go to Albany, which is the next biggest city, or Binghamton, or some of the other, college towns around. So one band I was in called The Fine Line, probably my favorite band. And it was a group of 3 other guys, and we played a lot of rock music. We played some covers, but a lot of originals, I would say, in the line of like, Foo Fighters, Nirvana, Jimmy Eat World, just good old rock and roll stuff. And I really enjoyed it. And that was my passion for the longest time. And at some point I realized, I think around the same time I was getting I wasn't really into cocaine, but I tried it. And, I realized, look, the chances of me getting famous or getting well known enough to make this a living are unlikely. So I was also working at Applebee's as a prep cook, a job that I hated. And I was like, why don't I just, kind of a perfect storm of like, I can't do this forever. I was selling weed. I was actually pretty good at it. I really enjoyed selling weed. It was my favorite job. I did pretty well. I mean, for a kid, there's a point where I was buying like 3 pounds at a time, and I was, starting from just buying a eighth and a quarter, and then, breaking dime bags and 20 bags, and then building it up. So I felt like I called myself an entrepreneur before everybody called themselves entrepreneurs about 20 years ago. And
well, what's the SOL on this?
Well, it's funny. I feel like we're going off on a tangent. This is totally not what I was planning to talk about, but it was a fun time and I really enjoyed it.
All right. Getting back on point, perhaps. What's the weirdest case you've ever had?
Weirdest case. I mean, they're all weird in their own ways. You get to know people, you get to know situations. Just trying to think. I don't know. If something sparks my head, I'll get back to you on that.
All right, then let's do a different one. What's the hardest case you've ever had?
The hardest case I ever had was, well, all right, it's not a great topic, but it was this client who was charged with rape of a child. And it's bad, but it's not as bad as what you're probably picturing. It was a 28-year-old guy who was a dance instructor, and he was accused of having sex with a 14-year-old. It would have been consensual, but for the age. And there's a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence for that charge if you're convicted, and you can get up to life. So it's a pretty significant charge. And first of all, the guy had talked to the police. He did a 45-minute interview with the police, didn't come across well. He contradicted himself at times. He admitted, for example, that he dropped the girl off a block away from her home. Obviously not a good fact. Why are you dropping her off a block away from her home? So there was an interview that came in at trial that was not great. He testified at trial, didn't come across that great. He was okay, but not the greatest. We had a mistrial. The first trial, the jury was hung. They couldn't reach an agreement. So then we had a second trial. And at the second trial, not only the first interview with the police came in, but also the first testimony came in. So they had a prosecutor that wasn't part of the case play the part of my client and sit on the witness stand. And then they went through the transcript. So the jury heard the statement to the police, the statement, his testimony under oath, reenacted, and then he testified at the second trial. So they heard three different statements. And to be honest, I was kind of cringing because I didn't think he came across all that great. And there was little contradictions. And, the DA was such a bulldog. Like she was so aggressive. So like leading up to the second trial, she was telling me that one of the jurors reached out to the DA's office and told her that it was like 10-2 in favor of guilty. So, she was telling me, you guys are cooked. You almost got a conviction in the last trial. Like it's so much stress. And we went in and we got a not guilty on both counts. So it was like, it was very difficult. But it was like extra satisfying because it was kind of like, when the DA is like, oh, you don't have a shot. You love being the underdog and coming up and coming on top and saying, now what?
Epic. Yeah, I love that. What do you think the number one mistake most defense attorneys make is, and like, how do you avoid it?
I think one thing is trying to either overpromise or trying to answer questions right away that you don't know. As I've gotten more experience, I'm more comfortable telling people I don't know the answer. But I think, and I feel like I've tried to do that all along. I've had some good mentors starting out, but I've seen other lawyers or heard about other lawyers from clients that maybe changed from a prior lawyer to me. Lawyers tell them information or trying to sell them on something that, oh, you got this motion to dismiss, we're going to win, or answering questions not thoroughly enough because the lawyer wants to be perceived as like, oh, I know the answer. I know all the answers. I'm going to give you the answer. But like I said earlier, I'm okay if I got to spend a half an hour and go do some legal research and figure out what the answer is before I answer it. So I think just being humble enough, or to a court, if a judge asks you a question and you don't truly know the answer, I think it's okay to say, look, judge, I'm happy to research it. If you give me a week, I'll come back with an answer or with a brief addressing that question. And I think that's helpful.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen clients make?
Talking to the police. That is the number one. I say it in my, any video about what to do after a charge, before a charge rather. You just don't talk to the police. I've seen so many cases that would have been winnable, but for that link in the chain. And it's not even outright admission. Sometimes it is. Sometimes I'm shocked. The client just like admits to everything, but sometimes it's one little thing that they think they're outsmarting the police. They think they've come up with some story. And yet there's just one little thing. Like maybe they admitted that they knew the alleged victim, and that could be enough because the police didn't have a connection that was solid between the two, or that they were in a certain town. So that's the biggest one. Talking to the police is just the absolute worst. But the other one that would be, I'm surprised at every time it happens, talking on the phone from jail. If somebody's held in jail, either on a very high bail or without bail, which happens from time to time, every time you pick up the phone, other than to a lawyer, you pick it up, they say this call is being monitored and recorded. It may be furnished to state and federal prosecutors, yada, yada, yada. And then somehow they proceed to talk about the case, and they sometimes make admissions. They sometimes try to pressure a witness not to testify, which is witness intimidation, a whole other felony. I guess you could sum it up to just talking. If you are being investigated or being charged with a crime, the only person you should be talking to is your lawyer, period, end of story.
Yep. People pulling the jinx. what is it? They know you did it. They got you on a
Right.
hot
They think,
mic.
right. That's a great one.
You must have like crawled out of your skin watching that. Are there any other like popular culture type of scenes that you could think of where you were just like dying because of your background?
I don't know about anything that compares to that off the top of my head, but my mom likes to watch Law and Order, and so whenever I'm visiting her and watching it, it kind of drives me crazy because first of all, they go from investigation to trial like a week later. And second of all, when there's a lawyer asking witness questions, they'll go from questioning the witness to like looking at the jury and making an argument and then going back to questioning the jury, which is obviously not how it works in real life. So it drives me a little bit crazy in that sense, but I guess it's all in good fun. And I mean, trials they can be boring. Like just as an aside, I had a trial yesterday. It was a 1-day intimidation of a witness and violation of a restraining order. I brought my 13-year-old son. It was the first time he had come to court to watch a trial, and he liked it, but he also said it was kind of boring because there's parts that are just mundane. You know, you're picking the jury, you're just waiting, you're listening to the judge give instructions for 20 minutes that are just droning on about the law. So I can understand why shows, they want to pick it up a little bit and keep things exciting for the audience.
Do you have any go-to jury selection like tips?
Keep an open mind. I think that there are colleagues that I have that they'll say, oh, you know, this person is married to a cop or is friends with a cop, get him off the list. You know, we're defense lawyers. We don't want cops on there. I kind of take a different view. This is one example, but even actually yesterday, there was a guy in the jury for this case that I had yesterday. He was best friends with a police officer. He told us at jury selection that he was his best man at that guy's wedding, this cop's wedding. I liked him. The client was okay with it. And we got a not guilty verdict on both counts. But the reason that I actually kind of like sometimes cop friends or cop family members is because unlike people who don't know cops and they might put them up on a pedestal, if you like the police and you're like, oh my God, the police never lie. If you know cops, you know they're human and you know that they're full of crap just like everybody else is full of crap. So that's just one example, but there's a lot of examples of preconceived notions. You might think that somebody's going to have certain views just because of what they do for work or certain background. But in my experience, it's really important to like really listen to them and look at their body language, listen to what they're saying before you make a judgment. And I found that that's worked out pretty well. So keeping an open mind for me is
What are the biggest red flags for you though, when you are selecting? Like what would make you immediately say like, oh, I can't select that person?
Sometimes it's just subtle things. Like if my client is up at the side of the bench when we're doing like the individual voir dire, we can ask jurors questions one by one, typically. And a lot of times I like my client up there, one, because I want them to be part of the process and help me, you know, I'll give them advice and make sure they're comfortable. But two, I'm always interested if a person goes up and they're smiling at the prosecutor and saying hi and not looking at my client or me. Sometimes I'm like, okay, this person's problem, no matter what they say, they're either uncomfortable to the point where they can't even address another human being because they're charged with a crime. So to me, that's usually a big one that like this person.
So that's great advice. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a lot more about like the non-verbal cues than it is about the verbal ones. And that's pretty universal, I feel. Okay, Joe, before we adjourn, can you tell us a little bit about your TikTok channel and not .guilty, which is an epic handle, and the type of content you usually put up there?
Yeah, thank you. So in my free time, I like to post on TikTok, and it's been pretty good. I mean, I have a pretty decent range of videos from things that are serious, like sometimes an update in the law, to sometimes there's a silly sketch. I come up with something like based on a real scenario, and I did a bunch of filming last week that I'll be posting some videos about, but different scenarios of things. And sometimes it's just to crack myself up, and sometimes things pop off. But yeah, check me out on not.guilty for some legal news, some funny bits, and you know, just some day in the lives of a criminal lawyer.
Amazing. Well, we're definitely going to check it out. Thanks again for joining us, Joe. I think this was a really insightful, interesting conversation. Catch us on the next Hot Docket. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Hot Docket. We're your hosts, Bobby and Andrew, founders of MemePug, the marketing agency for ambitious law firms.
Have questions about marketing or anything we covered today? Email us at bark@meanpug.com. Be sure to subscribe to learn more. Until next time.